They don't approach you when you're strong. They don't strike when you're loud. They wait. Manipulators aren't aggressive first. They're patient. They watch how you react when nothing is happening. When there's no pressure. When you think you're safe. That's where the game actually starts. Most people believe manipulation begins with force, with demands, with confrontation. It doesn't. It begins with permission, disguised as politeness. A small request. A harmless question. A moment where you're invited to explain yourself just a little. Nothing feels wrong yet. And that's the point. Because manipulators don't test your strength. They test your access. They're measuring how fast you reply, how much you justify, how easily you open emotional doors. Every response is data. Not to judge you, to map you. And silence here isn't power yet. It's a test. If you rush to fill it, they learn something. If you over-explain, they log it. If you make yourself constantly available, they take note. This isn't cruelty. It's pattern recognition. Machiavelli understood this long before psychology named it. Power doesn't announce itself. It studies first. And Jung warned that what isn't conscious will quietly run your life. At this stage, you're not being controlled yet. You're being evaluated. This is the moment before leverage exists. Before pressure. Before consequence. Call it what it is, the entry point. Miss this phase, and everything that follows feels confusing. Catch it early, and the rest of the game changes. Because once you see how manipulation begins, you stop mistaking politeness for innocence. After you recognize a manipulator, the game changes. They don't start with force, they start with subtle tests, probing for rhythm, consistency, and openness. Every word you speak, every pause, every glance, it's all data. But now, your job isn't only to notice it. Your job is to deny them predictable access. The moment they can anticipate your reactions, they hold a handle. And manipulators crave handles. They need something reliable to pull, something that signals, here is leverage. Here is access. Here is control. Most people think manipulation is loud, aggressive, or obvious. It isn't. It begins with permission disguised as politeness, with subtle invitations to respond in predictable ways. You explain yourself when no explanation was asked. You justify feelings that weren't questioned. You respond immediately to tension. To the world, these are signs of consistency and integrity. To a manipulator, they're a map, coordinates of your mind and behavior that can be exploited later. Recognizing this is one thing, acting on it is another. So, you disrupt the pattern. You shorten responses without becoming cold. You flatten your tone without being defensive. You make your presence non-automatic without creating distance. Every interaction becomes slightly unpredictable. A small pause here. A measured word there. A subtle irregularity that breaks rhythm. Imagine a manipulator pulling on a rope that snaps unpredictably. Each tug fails to produce the expected result. That's exactly the tension you create. A friction that destabilizes their approach and forces recalibration. And yes, it feels uncomfortable at first. Your instinct will push you to explain, to justify, to fill the gap. That discomfort is precisely why this works. Internal tension is your ally. When you resist it, you create uncertainty, a space manipulators hate. That space is where control begins to shift. They can no longer map your reactions or predict your decisions. They hesitate. They test again. They push for engagement, for explanation, for reassurance. And every time you refuse the automatic response, you reclaim authority over the interaction. But don't mistake this for power yet. This is positioning, the preparatory phase. By denying the clean handle, you haven't dominated, you've set the stage. Manipulators will escalate. They'll manufacture urgency, introduce subtle pressure, and try to provoke instinctual reactions. That's where most people fail. They give in, respond too quickly, or over-explain. And that's exactly the moment you should learn how to capitalize on, when the manipulator's escalation becomes the opportunity for strategic leverage. Remember, every interaction is now both a test and a measure of your control. Your unpredictability becomes a silent message. You don't get to dictate my timing, my tone, or my reaction. If you want access, you'll have to earn it. This is not aggression. It's not hostility. It's the first true step in turning observation into authority. Manipulators don't stop at testing. Once they sense friction, once they feel resistance, they escalate. They increase pressure, speed up the timeline, prod deeper, introduce subtle traps. Most people panic in these moments. They flinch, justify, or over-explain. That's exactly what manipulators count on. But here's the truth. Escalation is not chaos. It's information. Every push, every dig, every baited smile reveals priorities, insecurities, and desperation. And every revelation is an opportunity if you remain calm, measured, and deliberate. The moment you recognize escalation as data, you step out of instinct and into calculation. Your mind slows while theirs races. The questions they hurl, the expectations they manufacture, even the hidden urgency in their tone, all of it becomes raw material. You don't answer immediately. You don't defend yourself. You pause. You breathe. You measure. That pause is not hesitation. It is strategic delay, and it's far more powerful than immediate reaction. Because when you withhold the predictable response, you force the manipulator to act first, to overcommit, to reveal themselves. Internal tension will spike. Your instincts scream to fix the interaction, to reassure, to over-clarify. That discomfort is your ally. It signals that you are stepping into a higher order play, one that requires patience and subtlety. Emotional restraint is your weapon. Every flinch, every overcorrection, every rushed explanation would hand them back the control they were trying to lose. Instead, by staying unreadable yet aware, you reclaim the rhythm of the engagement. You are no longer reacting to their moves, they are reacting to yours. This is also the moment to leverage contrast. If they push aggressively, respond with calm. If they feign charm or urgency, meet them with detachment. Your tone, your pace, your choice to act or not act becomes a mirror, not to mock, but to expose. When someone expects a reaction and finds none, uncertainty fractures their composure. They search for a foothold that doesn't exist. They try harder, show more, leak information. Every moment of escalation becomes a controlled environment where you observe, adapt, and subtly influence the outcome. You are no longer just denying access. You are shaping the battlefield, converting the manipulator's aggression into insight and leverage. They escalate because they assume power comes from pressure. You teach them power comes from restraint, but this is not the final step. The real mastery begins when you learn how to translate this leverage into action without tipping into reaction or moral conflict. Moving from strategic pause to deliberate influence, transforming observation into authority, and turning hesitation into control. They think they can pressure you because they've learned to read reactions. But what happens when there's nothing to read? What happens when your behavior, your timing, your presence, all of it, follows rules they cannot bend? This is no longer about managing escalation. This is about removing the conditions that allow escalation to exist at all. Every interaction becomes pre-structured, every pause intentional, every boundary non-negotiable. The manipulator can probe, bait, test, but every probe hits a wall. Every test finds a limit. Constraint becomes your invisible weapon. You don't just remain calm, you operate inside unbreakable patterns. Your responses, your gestures, even your tone, are constants. Nothing shifts, nothing bends, nothing invites leverage. The manipulator doesn't fail because you are silent. They fail because there is no inconsistency to exploit. no emotional surface to manipulate, no urgency to create. The field they thought they controlled is now yours by default. You preempt the test before it arrives. Meetings, conversations, messages, they are no longer reactive spaces. They are landscapes you've already mapped, structured to deny openings. A brief pause, a measured answer, a refusal to explain more than necessary. These are the signals that the terrain is off limits. The manipulator is forced to respond to you, not the other way around. Their usual tactics, urgency, emotional asymmetry, subtle pressure, simply do not land. And what breaks inside them is subtle, but unmistakable. Confusion. Frustration. They are adrift because the hunting grounds they relied on have vanished. They cannot map the space. Every expectation they carried into the interaction becomes friction against your invisible rules. They flail while you remain anchored. Inside yourself, the effect is just as powerful. You no longer react to pressure. You create the baseline rules of engagement. Every instinct to over-explain, to justify, to appease, is replaced with disciplined constraint. This is the foundation of strategic presence. When they attempt to strike, they find only structure. When they attempt to destabilize, they find only limits. And in that space of pre-structured control, you prepare. Not for reaction, but for authority, influence, and the next move that they will never see coming. Constraints stop the game. Leverage lets you decide how it ends. You've established your baseline, rules, limits, invisibility. But now the power isn't in holding back. It's in extracting insight, anticipating patterns, and letting others reveal themselves without realizing it. Every interaction becomes a source of intelligence. Every gesture, every hesitation, every attempt to provoke a reaction is data waiting to be turned into advantage. They think they are testing you. They think they are in control. They aren't. Not anymore. Notice how they behave when they fail to predict your response. A manipulator relies on rhythm, expectation, and predictability. When you break that rhythm, when your behavior is guided by strategy instead of reflex, they begin to overcompensate. They clarify unnecessarily, justify themselves, explain too much. Small slips they wouldn't usually reveal now appear under the weight of your unshakable pattern. You're not forcing them to act, you're letting their own mechanisms betray them. Observation has become a weapon. This is leverage. Not a loud, visible authority, but a subtle, unyielding asymmetry. Your attention, your approval, even your silence, these are no longer passive. They are signals, rationed and timed with intention. When someone seeks your validation, they do so on your terms. When they attempt to probe, they do so into a controlled environment where every reaction is calculated. Their energy is spent chasing access they no longer have. Every attempt to pull you into predictable behavior only reinforces your strategic advantage. You can see the shift in small, almost imperceptible ways. They hesitate before speaking, scan your cues for signs that aren't there, repeat themselves unnecessarily. They begin to reveal priorities they thought were hidden. They start to justify decisions without being asked. The imbalance is subtle, but unmistakable. The manipulator is no longer shaping the environment, they are responding to it. And the environment is yours. Leverage isn't confrontation. It isn't dominating the room with volume or aggression. It is quiet inevitability. It is the constant undercurrent that tilts interactions in your favor without theatrics. By now, the rules you've set, the patterns you've observed, and the structure you maintain have created a world where outcomes are subtly, consistently aligned with your presence. This is the point where the dynamic no longer resets. Constraint made you untouchable. Leverage makes the field tilt permanently. From this position, influence flows naturally. You don't need to act loudly. You don't need to prove dominance. Others begin to move through the space you control, revealing themselves, adjusting, justifying, all without realizing they've entered your game. The balance has shifted, quietly, irreversibly, and entirely in your favor. Everything you've learned, the recognition, the denial of access, the strategic pause, the extraction of leverage, now converges. This final layer isn't about reaction. It's about established presence. You no longer respond to chaos. You operate within a space where chaos moves around you. The old rules no longer apply. This is a state where influence is not granted. It simply exists. The manipulator, who once sought openings, now encounters a landscape that no longer rewards their tactics. There is no surface to probe, no predictable rhythm to exploit, no pattern to leverage. Their advantage has dissolved, not because you resisted, but because the environment itself has shifted. Every interaction, every observation, every controlled word you offer now subtly shapes the space around you. Others begin to align unconsciously with your timing, your decisions, your priorities. Influence has become structural, not reactive. Imagine a room where tension once dictated behavior. Now, presence alone establishes the rhythm. What the manipulator expected to extract, reaction, compliance, confusion, has vanished. They are left responding to conditions they no longer control. This isn't visible dominance. It isn't performance. It is gravity. Interactions bend quietly toward the constant, the anchored, the measured. Every overreach they attempt, every urge to provoke, only confirms the shift in balance. Leverage and constraint created safety, pattern recognition created advantage. Now, the terrain itself ensures the dynamic cannot reset. Others feel the pull without understanding why. They seek alignment, anticipate your direction, and hesitate in spaces where before they acted freely. The game hasn't ended because of confrontation. It has ended because the field has been rewritten. This is the final phase, quiet, structural authority. You are no longer a participant in someone else's agenda. You are the reference point. You do not insist. You do not demand. You simply exist, and the world around you adjusts accordingly. Nothing can recreate the old conditions. There is no next move. The game no longer exists in the form it once did. You've seen how manipulation unfolds. You've learned how to deny access, harvest leverage, and shape the environment before pressure even arrives. You've built presence that is no longer contestable, influence that is structural, and authority that moves quietly through every interaction. This isn't about winning arguments. It isn't about proving yourself. It's about establishing a reality where the game no longer exists on someone else's terms. You don't react. You don't explain. You don't chase approval. You simply occupy the space with a presence that others unconsciously respect, anticipate, and align with. The lessons stop here, but the change begins the moment you step into the world carrying them. The rules have shifted. The terrain has been rewritten. And now, there is no next move, because the game is yours.